all, Taoiseach, I think it has to be said from all sides of the House that I think you'll have to go over here. It has to be said from all sides of the House that some of the photos we saw last weekend of people protesting outside your house shouldn't be condoned. Nothing seems to be out of bounds at the moment. So I want to stand in solidarity with you there. This is about rural Ireland, Taoiseach. In 1980, when I was going to school, there was buses, an old yellow bus, right around the country, brought youngsters to school in all parts of Ireland. I know with COVID that the numbers of people were reduced to 50%, and unfortunately children have been left behind, and this seems to be a yearly thing. You know, we're going to be in more affluent society and we're leaving children behind us year on year. In cities at the moment, and rightly so, those children buses are back to full capacity, so obviously they get to school. But what we have created in rural Ireland, Taoiseach, is mothers and fathers that are, have to go to work are now trying to solve problems of bringing their youngsters to school. And this is in light of, a few months ago, you and your colleagues decided on voting in a new climate change bill. And at the same time, a few weeks later, we have put more people on the road. At the same time, Taoiseach, we see today in the Farmers' Journal a report out where the Taoiseach, the Minister for Agriculture, is stabilising the herd. And there is a lot of confusion out there for the simple reason, if a youngster that's starting off farming at the moment is going into a bank, they need to know their future, they need to know where they're going. And we need to know, Taoiseach, in rural Ireland, are you going to go back to 100% in the buses and sort out the children that now their fathers and mothers are going on the road, if you're so interested in climate change? Are you going to sort them out to make sure that the buses go back to 100%, which will be able to cater for most of the children that are being hauled in cars and SUVs at the moment? That's the first question. Second of all, Taoiseach, it's important for the farmers out there in rural Ireland, in light of what has been reported in the Farmers' Journal this morning, are you staying on the roadmap, which I understood was through nitrates, through different figures for be it a dairy cow, suckler cow, calf, whatever? Are we staying on that road, or is there a new agenda now in the likes of in the climate bill? And is there clarity for those farmers going forward? And in light of the way energy prices have soared, and I know you're going to talk about, and I understand that you'll talk about, you'll say that people may get more in their fuel allowance. It's Middle Ireland that I'm talking about here, Taoiseach, that's paying more to bring their kids to school and fuel.
Thank you, Deputy.
That's paying more to go to work.
Thank you, Deputy.
That's paying more to heat their homes. Middle Ireland that don't get any of those subsidies that's out there. Will you answer those questions for me, please?
Thanks. Thanks very much, Deputy. The Taoiseach is in New York chairing the UN Security Council. I'm just the first sub, the Taoiseach, just in case anyone wasn't aware of that. But happy to be first sub here today. To answer your questions, Deputy, first of all, in relation to the carbon budget, the plan is to stabilise the herd, not to reduce it. But that does mean we have to do a lot in other areas to reduce emissions from agriculture, because we don't want to have to reduce the size of the herd or reduce the amount of food produced, because all that will happen is it gets displaced to other parts of the world where they will produce it less sustainably than we do, and that's not good for the environment. So the aim is stabilisation, continuing to produce as much meat and milk as we do now, but having to do a lot more then in sustainability in agriculture to enable us to do that. I think the point you make about Middle Ireland is absolutely right, Deputy. Yes, in the budget we are looking at things like an increase in the fuel allowance and increases in pensions and social welfare, so that people can keep up with the rise in the cost of living. It's not an increase, it's really just indexation. And the same thing applies for working people too. That's why we do need pay increases, and there are pay increases in most parts of the economy in the coming year. In the public service, there will be an increase in the minimum wage. But it's also why we need tax indexation. And they're not tax cuts, as Sinn Féin likes to describe them. It's tax indexation. It's just making sure that if people get that pay increase, get that increment, that they're able to keep it. So if somebody earns €40,000, let's say, roughly an average income, they get a pay increase of 2%. that's €800. At the moment, they would lose half of that in tax, so they'd only get €400. That's not enough to keep up with the rise in the cost of living. But with indexation, they'll keep most of that €800. They'll get 650, 700. That's the whole point of indexation. It's not a tax cut. It's just making sure that Middle Ireland hold on to whatever small pay increase or increment they get. In the same way as we increase pensions or we increase welfare to take account of the rise in the cost of living, we should do the same when it comes to income tax. And that's what indexation is. It's not a tax cut. It's just making sure that Middle Ireland isn't left out. And I know that's why you'll be supporting that measure in the budget, I'm sure. In relation to school transport, to date, over 100,000 tickets have been issued for children availing of transport on primary and post-primary school transport schemes, an increase of 7% on the tickets issued this time last year. Planning for school transport for the 2021-2022 school year has proceeded on the basis that the public health measures in place as schools closed at the end of the last school year would remain as the term began in this new school year. This includes recommendations from public health that post-primary services would operate at 50% capacity. All other measures relating to hygiene, pre-assigned seating, cleaning and the wearing of masks by post-primary students are also in place. However, as the vaccination programme for children on post-primary services is rolled out and the lifting of restrictions on public transport services proceeds, the capacity limit of 50% on post-primary school transport services will be subject to ongoing review, and the Department will be making a decision on this in the coming weeks.
Deputy Fitzmaurice, 1 minute.
Taoiseach, if we're interested in talking about climate change, the first thing we should be doing as a minimum requisite is saying to all school-going children in rural Ireland, or indeed in the cities, that there's a ticket there for you. Don't have the car or the SUV or whatever going up and down the road with one child in it. That's the first common sense thing. It's not going to rob the bank. There's plenty of money wasted in this country. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, you talked about, and I welcome what you have said in relation to tax and in relation to the other measures that you spoke about in relation to the budget. But the one thing, there's more than public service workers in rural Ireland. There's private operations, there's people that set up their own businesses, there's people working in the private sector. And I understand from the tax that you're talking about, basically helping them in the tax system. But the reality of it is, with electricity over the last year, with heating their homes and with the transport going to work, it is probably about €1,200 that they're out of pocket. So that's what we need to be talking about. And in relation to young farmers, and I want clarification on this, Taoiseach, that you've said about stabilising the national herd. If there's a young farmer starting up, will they be allowed to make sure that they'll be able to go into stocking if they want to? Is it going to be on the nitrates of X amount of units per hectare like it was proposed, or is there a new system coming?
Yeah, thanks, Deputy. I can't answer that question today. You know, the carbon budget and the climate action plan aren't agreed yet, but they will be in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully that will give certainty, not just to people in agriculture, but to people across the economy and across our society. But we as a government, we want young people going into farming. We want them to know that this is a career and a livelihood and a lifestyle that they can have. We want Ireland to continue to be a food producer. I'm proud of the fact that this is a country that produces enough food to feed maybe 45, 50 million people, 9 times our population. And I don't think we would achieve anything in terms of food security or climate by producing less food. That food is going to be needed. There's going to be an increased demand for food across the world. And we're the ones who produce it more sustainably than others. We're going to have to produce it more sustainably again. But I think it would be a retrograde step if we produced less food and then had other countries produce it for us in a way that would be much less sustainable.